Hi all, thanks for joining our Microsoft Teams demo webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping things to begin with. The Q&A window on the right hand side. If you've got any questions throughout, please just enter them there and we'll come back to you. In terms of this webinar, we're using Teams live event. We've been doing quite a lot through Teams live events of late, and it works well for the functionality that we've got it. And clearly today's demonstration is all about the capabilities of Teams and all the functions that sit behind it. So I'm James Woods. I'm the business manager at Cloud for the business manager at Arrow for the Cloud silo. So I'm responsible for the cloud revenue and the relationship with our vendors and also our partners. I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues from the SureStep team at Microsoft, and they're going to go through a little bit about Teams and the capability, and I'm going to finish off with some of the capability around the current offers that are available from Arrow. So with that, I'll pass over to Matthew Blackwell, that's going to go through Teams data and flow.
Yeah, thanks very much, James. And firstly, welcome to everybody on the call today. It's good to have everybody here. So in terms of kind of what we're going to cover off today, as James has said, we are going to start to look at various different areas around Teams. So as a first point, it's really important for us to have everybody understand actually where that location of that data sits within Teams. So as an example here, you've got some of the data storage around Teams. So as an example, if you were to share a file through Teams, where does that back up to? So if that was shared on something like this sort of example where it's to multiple people, that will be backed up to SharePoint, purely for the purposes that everybody can collaborate on that document and actually co-author it. And we'll talk about a little bit around that later on in the webinar. Other areas such as the recording capability. So this is an example will be recorded and that will automatically be backed up to stream. So we get a lot of questions around kind of Teams data functionality and actually where that data sits at rest. So we just wanted to kind of open up with that side of things. Now, just before I jump into the kind of starting to the functionality around Teams and the front end piece, it's really important for us to kind of frame the landscape that we sit in at the moment around Teams. So, I'm sure everybody is aware the remote working environment has exploded, certainly over the last probably 6 weeks. And to kind of put that into perspective, the number of daily users that Microsoft was seeing around Teams was around about 30 million per day pre-COVID. At this point, we're around 46 million daily users. So we've grown by more than 50% in a very short space of time. And one of the figures that I saw the other day actually was the most startling one was around video usage. So before, again, pre-COVID, we were averaging around 3 to 4% video usage on most calls. That's actually jumped to around about 91%. I think the last stat was where people are having to utilize Teams in that kind of more personable way, as opposed to just simply utilizing the calling capabilities. So that kind of just starts to frame where we're at today with Teams. So what we're going to do as part of this today is we're going to look at each of the areas of Teams and start to talk you through some of the functionality, some of the best practice when it comes to actually utilizing Teams. And then we're going to start to hand over to my colleague, Matt Bond, who will take you through actually how to implement some of the policies around Teams, how to lock it down for external users, and again, how to implement some things like data loss prevention policies. So we'll start off with one of the most kind of basic functionalities around Teams, which is the calendar function. Now, it's really important to note at this point that the calendar function syncs perfectly with Outlook. So whether you were to plan something in through Outlook or whether you to plan something in through Teams, you will see them appear in both. So there's a perfect sync when it comes to that. Now, the actual calendar function within Teams utilizes a lot of AI to drive it. So you may have seen certain functions within, such as the scheduling assistant. So what the scheduling assistant allows you to do is to schedule something in, whoever it might be. And if you are scheduling this meeting in with, say, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 people, we've all been in that situation where you've got to kind of go back and forth saying, I'm not available at this time. Well, I am available at this time. What the scheduling assistant allows you to quickly do is, by using the lookup function and API within through to Outlook, allows you to quickly look at whether people are available or not. So ordinarily, this is a demo environment, but it would show Diego and Lynn's availability, and you can just use the slider to quickly select when everybody or when a majority of people are available. So massively underutilized when it comes to actually utilizing the calendar function within Teams. What you've also got within here is what we're actually using now, which is a Teams live event. So this is particularly important when you are utilizing Teams for things like company-wide broadcasts. So if this, for example, this live event where we've got sort of 50, 60, 70 people attending, if we were to utilize this as just a simple dialing function, you would probably quite quickly see the, especially if everybody's using video, the quality of that stream start to diminish. What a live event allows you to do is to schedule something in, such as this, where attendees quickly just enter through an attendee link. You don't have to worry about muting them, managing those attendees. They still have the function to ask questions, but again, it removes the need for a huge bandwidth problem when we're coming to massive broadcasts. So the live event, very, very easy to set up. You can actually lock down who is a producer or a presenter. So you might only have 2 or 3 people as producers or presenters, and that allows them to share their content, to start the meeting, to end the meeting. But just wanted to kind of call out the live event as a particular function. Again, it's massively underutilized when it comes to utilizing calendar function within Teams. What we then kind of move on to is the calling capability within Teams. So at a very kind of high level, the calling capability is built on Skype, to what we probably all know as Skype for Business now. And what the actual calling capability allows you to do is some of the key things which Daniel will talk about is ability to do things like blur my background. You've probably all seen the custom backgrounds now, and the integration of Microsoft Stream for recording and transcription. And that's just kind of some of the reasons why we've seen Teams raise the bar for kind of communication and collaboration. Equally, the share my screen capability has evolved, so you can now choose to share a specific window, rather than your entire screen. Now, it's important at this point to note, within the calling capabilities, a lot of users of Teams will think the fact that they have the ability to make a call, that they actually have business voice integrated within that. So that's actually not true. So the ability to simply make a call through Teams is somebody within your organization. So you can utilize a quick lookup with somebody in your organization, quickly dial those, or equally, if you were in a chat function, which Daniel will talk about, you can quickly dial a group of people with just one button. When it comes to business voice, a lot of customers are adding calling capabilities into Teams with the actual phone system, which is ultimately your cloud PBX and PSTN calling. Now, there's various different calling plans that are available, but what we are finding quite quickly is that end users or organizations that are utilizing Teams are maybe missing that kind of cloud-based telephony system that allows them to actually run their entire business from the remote working environment. So just important to note there on the calling capabilities within Teams. Now, the actual calling capability is very, very simple and very, very easy, but in particular, we'll use Microsoft as an example for this. When you have an organization which has potentially tens of thousands of people, so if any of your, even some of your end users may have organizations that are 500 to 1,000 people, just kind of quickly looking people up within the function capability that are in their tenant or domain is a massive time saver when it comes to this. You can do things like add in speed dials, you can add in groups. So as I said before, if you have a particular marketing group, you can quickly add that in. And again, you can initiate a call or a video conference immediately with one touch of a button. So really, really important to note those calling capabilities through Teams. And then finally, from my perspective, there is the files sharing capability within Teams. So I mentioned before around that kind of data flow functionality. Now, the Files tab actually relates to all of your most recent documents. So you can organize your documents by most recent. You can link that obviously up to OneDrive. Important to note at this point as well that a lot of your end users may well be using cloud storage that isn't Microsoft, such as Dropbox or Google Drive. So Teams is fully functional with any of those cloud storage mechanisms. So important to note at that point that it doesn't just require end users to utilize SharePoint or OneDrive. They can plug in their own cloud storage when it comes to files. Now, within the files capability within Teams, you have the ability to co-author documents at one time. So what it quickly does is it removes that need for multiple people to be version controlling documents. So it does away with, I'm working off version 7 while I'm working off version 2. The way that Teams file sharing works is you would upload the file. Once people are into that, and it supports, I think, up to 250 people in a file at any one time co-authoring. I wouldn't recommend that, but it does support that. Any changes that are made within Teams within the file are automatically saved. So again, it kind of improves that kind of immediate backup, removes kind of data loss opportunities in there, and it really does, certainly from my perspective, allow that co-authoring to be done in a far more cohesive way. So if you have to produce, say, weekly reports, everybody can work on that report at one time, be in that report at one time, automatically saves, and it automatically backs up to SharePoint. So very, very important, and again, massively underutilized when it comes to the files piece within Teams. The other piece that you can actually start to do is anybody that is co-authoring a document at one time, you can actually initiate a meet now function. So you can actually dial everybody that is currently working on that document. So that kind of just introduces the first 3 elements. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Daniel, who's going to start to talk you through the activity, chat and Teams functions that you can start to utilize as well.
Hi all, I'm hoping you can see my screen. Okay, I'm going to talk you through the chat function first. In many ways, chat is like sending back and forth emails, but it's a lot simpler and it has a lot more functionality, so you can very easily replace it. As an example, I'm planning to talk to somebody, let's say Johnny, and as soon as I type it, I can have the full list of drop down of the people I need to talk to. And as soon as I click on their name, there would be a new conversation that would start. Now, if it's a person I've had conversations in the past, let's say Megan that I've had a conversation with in the past, you can see there is a continuum into the conversations we've had. So it won't just disappear like the chat box on Skype or any other application you might use. There is always the previous conversations you've had, and it would stay there along with the files that you've shared. It also gives you this very little icon here that show if when the other person sees your message. If I need to talk on video, I have a chat, I have the video function or a call function. I also can share my screen or gain or control of Megan's screen if I need to. That's particularly helpful if we are working on a project or we need to look at the same thing. I can also add anybody I want to this conversation at any point. I just need to click add people and add the name, and it would be straight away added to the conversation. Now, in project work, quite often we have the conversation, we talk about something, and then there is a need to add somebody to the conversation. And the problem at that point is that all of us need to go through our old conversations and emails and dumpster dive through our recycle bin to find all the files we have discussed and give it to the new person so they are up to speed with what we're doing. Now, on Teams, if I am to add somebody new to this group, I can use and add people. Now, it doesn't matter who I'm adding, it would give me these options, whether or not I want to share the past number of days or the information or the history that we've had along with the files we've shared so far, which makes it much easier for people to become up to speed a lot quicker. You also have quite a few options right at the bottom here, so you can attach a file if you need to. You can make the most of the emojis or the gifs or the stickers. Matt already talked to you about the scheduling meeting, but when I have a team here, all I have to do if I want to schedule a meeting is to click on the scheduling meeting. And as Matt showed you earlier on, it would show availability for everybody, which makes life a lot easier, especially if you have a group while you're having the conversation. You can also add other applications if you need to. So you can stream it, or you can record your meeting. So even the people who are missing the meeting later on, they can go back and watch the recording rather than trying to catch up with different people to become up to speed. I've also here added the stocks for myself, and I've added forms. So if I am to ask opinion from the people, and not everybody's online, or meeting options for answer, and I can send it away. The easiest part is that as soon as this is done in a different as you can take part in the conversation that was now one of the here, as you can see, I've posted this before, and people can see who's answered how far you have on that. You can pin a conversation to the top. So if this is a conversation you have regularly, the people you work with time, you can keep it on the top. You can mute a particular group. Let's say a main broadcast of the groups that you don't find it as urgent. You can hide a group. So if you're having a conversation or you're sharing your screen with your team, and you don't want them to see all the chats or the conversation you have, you can hide it, and you can add a range of applications from Microsoft and other third parties to make the most of the abilities you have. It might be your scheduling, it might be Shift, it might be Kronos, or other applications. Now, there are times that when we work on applications like this, we are working with people who don't speak necessarily the same language. Teams has the ability to translate instantly from the language that the conversation is being typed into the desired language of your choosing, or it has the ability to read it out loud if you're doing something else that you can't look at it. It also has the ability to, if I'm talking to Megan and I'm watching something else, I'm doing something else, I can double click on this, and the conversation with Megan would pop into a new box. That box would allow me to continue my conversation with Megan while I am doing the other activities I'm involved in on Teams. Now, sometimes just having a chat is not enough, and you need a little bit more organized approach to a project or work you're doing. That's when Teams can prove very, very helpful. You can create different teams for different functions. You can have a group team. You can add different channels for each team, which all of them would have an individual file sharing and people who are participating in it. The post function is pretty much like chat with a couple of added functions. As an example, on chats you can only type a new message, but on post you can if you want answer to a particular message that somebody sent. This way, if there are several conversations happening on this channel, it won't be confusing for the people who are reading it or might not be up to speed with what's happening, because you answer a particular, so I can answer here this particular message, or I can type it here straight away. It's up to me. You have the same options at the bottom as well, as I mentioned earlier on. On Teams, you have this extra ability. So you have the files that Matt talked to you about earlier on. But if you have a file, let's say I have an Excel file, and I think this is being used more often, and I would like to share it with other people, I can add a tab. And when I'm adding a tab, so let's say I click on a new tab, I can choose what that tab needs to look like. I can add a note, I can add all other applications I want, or I can add an Excel sheet or forms I have. Now, in this instance, I've added this form because this is an application. This Excel sheet, I want everybody to be able to use and edit it. There's co-authoring a document. As you can see, there's evidence of it. So I can see at the moment, Patty is editing the very same file I am editing. without one of us getting in the way of the other one, which is very, very handy. Now, you can add as many applications as you want and as many functions as you want. As an example, I've added here Microsoft Planner, which makes it much easier to add tasks for people and what they need to do with a deadline, and they can explain how far they've gone into a particular project, which sort of eliminates the need of keep catching up with people to see how far they've gone and how much progress they've made. Now, if in nowadays busy work, we tend to end up in a few groups and a few channels and chat lines. So every time we are away for a few hours, for a few days, we are back, and we have the need to go through every single project we are involved in to get an update on, see what has happened and what's the next step. Now, this function of activity on Teams eliminates all that need, because every time there's an activity in a project you're involved in, or a chat, or if your name is mentioned, here on the activity, it would give you a little prompt, and you can look and see what has happened. So if there's a project that there's no progress made, you don't need to worry about it. You can focus on the part that makes it much easier and quicker for you to catch up with what happened. The same way, if you would like to attract somebody's attention, or you would like to bring them into a conversation, all you have to do in any of the chat boxes or on Teams when you're talking, to type, let's say, @ Megan, and as you can see, it would come as an autofill here, that people who work in the organization. So as soon as I click this and I press enter, then there would be a prompt for Megan that your name has been mentioned somewhere in a conversation. This was my part, and I'm going to pass the rest to my good colleague, Matt Bond. Matt?
Thanks, Daniel. Hi guys, so what I'll be doing now is I'll be covering the administrator side of Teams. So first what we'll be looking at is the Teams admin dashboard. So the first thing we see when we go into the dashboard is the dashboard page here. This is where you'll be able to search for any users in your Teams, and you can see some Teams user activity as well, up to 90 days. And what you also get is some organizational information. As you can see here, I've got Contoso because it's a demo tenant, but you'd see your own information here, of course. What you can also get is some learning information on Teams and some training as well. Now, the first thing we can do when it comes to personalizing and customizing the policy in our Teams is the Teams themselves. So what we can do is we can manage the Teams and their policies. So if I go to manage Teams here, what I will see is on this tenant, a list of all the Teams sites I have. I'll see how many channels are in them, how many members, how many owners, guests, its privacy, and its status. So as an example, if I click here on sales and marketing, I can have a look at what's involved. So the first thing I'll see is sales and marketing, its privacy public, as well as its email address. And what I'll be able to see is the list of users in this channel, in this Teams. I can see how many owners there are, how many members, and if I like, I can add new owners, which essentially act as a moderator for the team who can delete and manage the channel, or I can remove owners as well. And I can even remove users if I so wish. I can also look at the individual channels themselves. So we have general here for sales and marketing and monthly reports, and I can see if these are standard or private channels. What I can also do is look at the settings for this channel, for this team as well. So we have some conversation and channel settings, which we'll look at now. So if I want to do, I can go to edit, I can change the name, description, and the privacy of this team. But what I can then do is customize the policies around it. So in this example here, we can define if our team members can edit sent messages or delete sent messages. By default, that is on, but if we want, we can turn it off. What we can also do is govern the channels themselves. So are we going to allow new channels to be edited, creating new existing ones? Are we going to allow adding, editing, and removing of tabs in our channels? Adding, editing, and removing connections and apps. This is all something we can define on a channel-to-channel basis. Then if we go to policies, we can define that even more. So the default policy is the global policy. This is what we'll be looking at most of today, but if we want to, we can add more policies to even more customize our experience. But for simplicity today, we'll stick to looking at the global policy. So if I click on this, what I'll see is some things I can change. So what I can do is if I can allow our users to discover our private teams. So if I create a private teams channel, can other users search for it and request to join? That is off, meaning it's completely hidden. And do I want my users to be able to create private channels? That by default is off. Now if we go to locations, we can have a look here as well. So when it comes to reporting labels, by default, when you pull analytic data from Teams, it will be using their IP subnet. It won't be aligned to a location. However, in this tab here, this is where you'd upload a CSV or TSV file with your users' IP addresses linked to their location. You'd upload that here, which means when you pull in analytic data from Teams on your user base, you'll get realistic reporting based on their location. What we can also do is add emergency addresses. So what this means is, especially in today's world, our users aren't likely to be working from an office, and they might have a few different locations that they'll log in from. What this means is that you can add these addresses in that your users could potentially log in, and it means they'll be granted access to Teams instead of blocked out. Because what it would normally do is if a user logs in from a location that they're not recognised from, it would block their access. This allows your users to be able to access Teams in any location that you specify. Now, if we go to users, we can see a long list of our users as well. What we can see is their username, their phone number, location, their policies assigned, directory status, and if they have audio conferencing enabled. So, for example, if I click here on Alex, I'll see a few things. First thing I'll see is Alex's role. He's a marketing assistant. I'll see his location is the Netherlands. I'll see his business phone number and his address, his email address, as well as a 7-day quality for his calls and 7-day activity. So how many meetings Alex has had and how many calls he's had. I can see some information about his account, if he has audio conferencing enabled, if his conference is dynamic, his PIN, and a few other things as well. If I go to voice, I can define what his outbound calling is like on a user-to-user basis. So in this case, Alex isn't allowed to use business voice to use outbound calling. It's disabled for him. But if I wanted to, I could allow it for any destination or limit it to the same country or region as the organisation or the organiser. In this case, if Alex was to organise a meeting, he's in the Netherlands. So the person he outbound calls to has to be in the Netherlands too. What we can then do is look at Alex's call history. It doesn't exist because it's a demo tenant. But for a real user, you would see this populated. And then finally, we can see what policies Alex has assigned to him. In this case, Alex has the default global policy assigned, but if we like, we can assign a policy package. A policy package is a predefined set of policies for different types of users, such as education students or teachers or healthcare workers. But we'll get into a bit more depth on policy packages in a moment. The next thing we can do is we can govern how our meetings and live events are held. So if we go here to example being conference bridges, these are the numbers that when someone wants to dial into a meeting, they'd use. So we can add more or we can set individual settings for these conference bridges, such as meeting entry and exit notifications for them, and if the tones that are displayed or names or phone numbers when someone dials in. So if I like, I might only want it to do a little tone, a little sound when someone joins a meeting using a conference bridge, or it will announce their name and their phone number. But what I want to do is now look at the meeting policies themselves under global. So here, this is where we can really define our user's experience when they're hosting meetings. So in the general settings, we have things such as allowing Meet Now in channels. If we want to allow Outlook add-ins, allow channel meeting scheduling, or private meetings for our global users. We can also define how audio and video is used. So do we want to allow audio transcription? That's by default off, but you can turn it on if you like. Do we want our users to be able to record their meetings to the cloud? By default is on. And if we allow IP video, what's the bitrate? We can also control and define how content is shared. So if a user is sharing their screen, we can define what that looks like. So the screen sharing mode by default, we allow our users to share the entire screen. But perhaps we want our users to only be able to share a single screen, a single application. And maybe we want to disable it altogether. We can define if we want to allow participants in meetings to give or request control over a user's screen. And if so, do we want to allow external participants to do the same? By default, that is off because they're not a member of our organization. We can also define if we want to allow PowerPoint sharing, whiteboard, or shared notes. Then we can also govern how participants and guests interact with each other. So do we want to allow anonymous people to start a meeting? By default, this is off, but we can turn it on if we like. Automatically admit people, meaning that in this case, it's marked everyone in our organization. What that means is that once a meeting is scheduled, if someone is a member of your organization, they can automatically join the meeting. If they're not, they wait in a lobby and wait to be admitted by somebody within the organization. If we like, we can allow everyone to join the meeting, regardless if they're a member of our organization or not. And if we do allow everyone in our organization? Do we want to allow dial-in users using a conference bridge to bypass the lobby? That's on by default, but we might want to turn it off, meaning that dial-in users are governed the exact same way as Teams desktop users. We can also govern if we want to allow Meet Now in private meetings, live captions, and allowing chat in meetings too. If I save this, then I can look at meeting settings as well for some extra customization. What this means is, do I want anonymous users to join a meeting? That is something I can turn off, meaning that I only want people who I can see their identity joining my meetings. What I can also do is I can customize what my email invitations to meetings look like. So if I want, I can add a logo URL to my logo here, some legal information and some help information, maybe directing my users to my website or my invitees. And I can also customize the footer of what my invites look like, such as join my meeting. And then I can preview what that invite will look like. Join my meeting, join my Teams meeting. I can also customize how real-time media traffic is governed in Teams. So if real-time media traffic is used, do I want to insert quality of service markers for real-time media traffic? By default, that is off. But I can also select a port range for each type of real-time media traffic. So I can automatically use any available ports, or I can specify it myself. And I can specify that for audio, video, and screen sharing. Now that we've looked at meetings, policies, and settings, we can do the exact same for live events, what you're watching right now. So if I go to live events policies and again click on global, I can see that I can customize it. So I can select if I want to allow scheduling of live events at all, and if so, do I want to allow transcription for attendees? Who can join live events? So by default, this is on everyone. This is the policy that we have enabled, allowing you to join this live event. However, we may want to limit it to everyone in our organization or only specific users and groups. But by default, we keep it on everyone so it can be a public-facing event. And also, we can govern who can record event. So if an event is always recorded, or only the organizer can record, or if it's never recorded at all. And then if we go to live event settings, again, a little extra layer of customization being the support URL. So by default, it's going to direct our users and our attendees to support.office.com. However, we may want to instead direct them to our website. That's something you can completely define yourself. And if we want, we can use a third-party video distribution provider for our live events. An example being Hive and Collective. So now if we look at messaging policies, this is the real nitty-gritty of customization. So if I go to global, I can see a long list of policies that I can define for my users, such as can owners delete sent messages of other users? By default, that's off. But we maybe want to turn it on, an example of a client-facing group where owners want a bit more control over what's said. If we want to allow our users by default to delete sent messages or edit sent messages, we can turn it off. We can also govern how read receipts are used. So do we want read receipts to be governed by our users, or do we want to force it on for everyone? We can even define if we want chat to work at all. We can turn it off, but it may make for a slightly boring Teams experience if no one can talk to each other. We can also govern if GIFs are used in memes, and with GIFs we can even rate the content rating, strict, moderate, or no restriction. Things like stickers, can we use them? Are we going to allow URL previews? Can we translate messages? By default, that is off. But if we are a part of an international organization and we have maybe users in Germany, France, all speaking different languages, we might want to turn that on so we can translate their messages so they can have an easier experience in Teams. Do we want to allow immersive reading for viewing messages? Send urgent messages with prior notification? By default, it's on. As well as if we want to create voice messages, or on mobile devices, will we display users' favorite channels above recent chats? As well, do we want users to be able to remove each other from group chats? We can turn that off if we like. And with anything with all these policies under global, we don't have to follow just by global. We can add a new policy set that will govern all these things. So everything from the users, meetings, everything, we can create our own policy set. But by global, it keeps it easy and unified. So previously, we also showed you how you can add third-party apps to Teams and use those. You can govern and manage how they're used. So if I go to manage apps, I'll see a long list of apps that I could potentially add to my Teams site. We won't go through them all because there's over 492, but by default, there's quite a lot of apps that you can add to your Teams site to use, but you can govern how they're used and if they're used at all. So if I go to organization-wide settings, I can see here, do I want to allow third-party apps? I can turn it off if I like. But if so, allow any new third-party apps published to this store by default. We can turn that off, meaning that we have to approve them. As well, do we want to allow custom apps to be emitted to our Teams site? So apps that are uploaded by our users. And we can go into even more depth with that. So if we go into permission policies and again into global, we can see how we actually customize it to our organization specifications. So as we see here, Microsoft Apps, that is always allowed on organization by default. If we like, we can disable it or specify it. But if we look at third-party apps, that's also allowed by default on all apps. But perhaps we only want to allow a very specific subset of apps. Maybe apps that we use in our line of business, our CRM, or third-party apps that we use on a day-to-day basis. We can allow specific apps and block all others. And then we can search for these apps here, meaning that only these apps can be used in third party. Alternatively, we can block specific apps and allow all others. So maybe apps that we're not sure of and we don't want our users using. Or we can block all apps altogether. As well as tenant apps, which are apps that are installed by our users. If we go to setup policies, again to global, these are how our users customize their experience. So by default, we allow our users to use their own pinning, meaning that on the left-hand screen of the apps they see, they can customize it to what they want, meaning they can add their own apps in there, they can choose what's pinned, what they see by default. But if we like, we can turn that off, meaning what they see on the left is defined by us. So we see here on the bottom, it's by default activity, chat, teams, calendar, calling, and files. However, if you like, we may want to add an app there to be seen by our users by default, or we may want to delete an app, which we'd then mark it and click remove. What we can then look at is the policy packages themselves. So these are the predefined policy packages pre-set up for you to have an easier Teams experience. So an example being, if we are say setting up a Teams tenant for a school, there are 4 different policy packages for school and education tenants. So we have the education teacher, education secondary school student, primary school student, and higher education student. These all have different policies to each other. An example being, if we go into teacher and look at their messaging policy, they have a predefined messaging policy. However, if we go back and have a look at perhaps the primary school student, they're going to have a widely different messaging policy enabled for them. This means that when it comes to setting up custom tenants for different types of organizations, it allows you to even just quickly ease the permissions and gives you time, if needed, to create your own custom policies. And it's quickly easy, it's really easy to add users to this. All we have to do is manage users and search for the user to assign them a policy package. And we all do it here, and we don't have to go through the individual users and assign them. We can all do it from this one page. Then if we go on to look at analytics and reporting, we can pull usage reports on Teams. So we see here, there's Teams usage activity, device usage, Teams usage, live event usage, SMS, blocked users, and minutes. These are all analytics reports we can pull on Teams. So if we went to device usage or user activity, we can pull that data up to 90 days. I can run that report. I'm likely not going to see anything because this is a demo tenant that doesn't have real people on it. But if this was a real tenant, you would see this data populated. And when it's downloaded, you can see here in the downloads tab who's downloaded it and when. Now what we can also do is govern our organization-wide settings for external access, guests, and teams in general. So if I go to external access, what I can do is I can govern if my users can communicate with other users on Teams and Skype. That's on by default, but maybe I want a completely isolated Teams site, only for my organization. I can turn it off. In the same respect, if I want my users to communicate with Skype users at all, I can turn that off. We don't like Skype. And then we can add trusted domains if we like of other tenants. Then if we go to guest access, we can actually govern how guests interact and experience our Teams site. So if I go allow guest access, which is off by default, we can govern a few things. So do we want our guests to be able to make private calls? We can turn that off if we like. As well as the meetings, do we want our guests to be able to use IP video? And if they share their screen, what does that look like? Entire screen, single application are disabled. Maybe I want guests to not be able to share their screen at all. As well as allowing meet now in channels. And then I can set very specific messaging policies exclusive to guests. So if guests can edit and delete their sent messages, maybe I want to turn that off. Even if I want my guests to be able to speak. Use Giphies, memes, stickers, or immersive reader, all specific to guests. What I can then look at is the Teams settings themselves. So if I go to notification feeds, what I can set is if suggested feeds will appear in a user's activity feed. I can turn that off. I can also govern how tagging works. So who's tagging enabled for? By default, it's going to be team owners. But if I want, I can make it team owners and members, or I can disable it altogether. And if so, can a team owner override who can apply tags, if members can apply additional tags, and what's the suggested default tags? We can also enable or disable email integration. So when you create a Teams channel, it has an email address. So what I can do is I can go to Outlook and email directly into a Teams channel without having to open Teams. If we like, we can disable this altogether. If that means we want our users to go directly to Teams instead of going the other way around through Outlook, we can define that. We can also govern how third-party storage applications are used. So by default, we have Citrix, Dropbox, Box, and Google Drive here. They're all enabled, but if we like, and we only want our users using OneDrive or our of choice platform for storage, we can turn them off as well. We can also see how organizations are shown. So for us in our Teams tenant, if you click on a user, you can look into their organization. You can see who they directly report to, their manager, as well as their colleagues. You can see their organization layout. This is on, but if we like, we can turn it off, meaning that you won't be able to see that information and you can only see that user. And when it comes to Teams certified devices, we can set if we would require a secondary form of authentication to access meeting content with these devices. So no access, partial access, or full access. And if we want to set a content pin. We can also define if we want our users to be able to search by name. So that means when we have a large organization, we may have quite a lot of users. So do we want our users to be able to go into search and search for a user just there? Or should they have a history with that user already? So by default here, it's disabled. Our users can't search by name in the directory, but we can turn it on, meaning that they can find people easily in our organization. And finally, what we want to look at is holidays. So in the UK, we have quite a lot of bank holidays, public holidays. This is where you'd add these in. So if I go here and add, I can add a public holiday in, the date and the end time, meaning that when I put this in and that comes to that day, our users are notified that they're not actually working today and they can turn off Teams. So that's the admin panel for Teams. But what we want to briefly look right now is at the security panel in the admin center as well. Because what we want to govern now is how data is protected on our team sites. So if I go to security here, log into my account, I'm now on the security and compliance dashboard. So there's quite a lot here, but we only want to worry about one thing. That's data loss prevention. Data is extremely valuable in today's world, and losing it can cost quite a bit of money. And when we're using an integrated communication platform like Teams, it's extremely important that we protect this data. So if we go to policy here in data loss prevention, we can create a policy. So if I go create a policy, what I can do is I can define the data I want to protect. As an example, let's go financial. Scroll down, we'll see UK financial data. So what I'll go next, I want to name my policy. It's UK financial data. That works for me. Maybe description if we like. Then I can choose the locations I want this to work on. So by default, protect content in Exchange Mail, Teams chats, and channel messages in OneDrive and SharePoint documents. It will protect my entire Office suite. I'm fine with that, but if you like, you can specify what location you want to protect. But for now, we're going to make sure that it protects everything. We can look at the policy settings. So this being a default policy, what it's going to look for is credit card numbers, EU debit card numbers, and SWIFT codes. And what do we want it to detect? With people when it's sent to people outside my organization or even inside my organization. For now, we'll remain as inside my organization. We can review our settings. So do we want to show policy tips and then send them an email notification when this gets flagged? So an example being, if a user goes to send credit card information to an external user, we're going to get an email notification flagging it, but that user is also going to be sent a tip not to do it again. And we can also detect when a specific amount of sensitive info is being shared at one time. So let's say when a document is being shared that has at least 10 instances of the same information type, credit card numbers, we can flag that immediately. And then we can define if we want to send an instant report and email to our admin. If we like, we can lower this to even 1. So if a document claims it contains even 1 credit card number, we want it flagged. So then we can review our policy settings. So do we want to turn it on immediately or test things out? I'd like to test it out first. And we can show policy tips in test mode, or maybe we want to turn it on right away. Review our settings, and then we create the policy. And that's that. So now when a user tries to send credit card number to an external user in Teams, as we defined, it'll be immediately flagged and prevented from being sent. So that is my bit for now. What I'm now going to do is hand back to my colleague Matt Blackwell, who's going to cover some of our current Teams offers and trials.
Thanks, Matt. James, I think you wanted to kind of finish off here, didn't you, from a kind of current Teams offers and trials perspective?
Sure. So let me 2 seconds. So yeah, so thanks guys for going through that and talking through that in detail. Hopefully you can see my screen now, but I just want to go through the current offers that are available from Arrow and on ArrowSphere. So the first bit, and I know there's some questions around this, is within ArrowSphere we've got the Microsoft Teams trials. So these are the trials that are available in ArrowSphere, so they're in line with the current state of affairs with COVID-19. And Microsoft offers these 2 SKUs out at the moment. And for partners that are new to Arrow, ArrowSphere is our cloud aggregation platform. It's where Microsoft licenses are found, and you can see here that these trials are available and able to be downloaded and put towards your customers. So kind of from the stuff that the 2 Matthews and Daniel's gone through, you know, these licenses are available, you know, for your customers to go and use and have 6 months free, either of an E1 SKU, which would have the capability, or just a standalone Microsoft Teams SKU for 6 months. So again, completely free to use. There are some prerequisites and some T's and C's that are associated with it, but we can share it, and it's available on our platform to download. And we've seen a steady uptick in this, given the current state of affairs and what's been happening there. So that's one part, is the Teams trials. If you're kind of looking at this and thinking maybe my end customer needs more in terms of actual training and understanding of Microsoft Teams, we do offer a workshop for end users. Now, Arrow is in a unique position that we are a indirect CSP provider, but we also have a training contract with Microsoft. So we're the only one in the UK that has the ability to facilitate our partners and the end customers on licensing and then also on the training element. Now, we have these coming up at the end of April, so on Tuesday the 28th of April, the 6th of May and the 14th of May. This has been moved to an online course or a virtual classroom. It's about 6 hours worth of content going throughout the day, but it does give you a real good flavour of the capabilities around it. And today's session's really given you a taster. You know, 6 hours of content around Teams gives you a lot more, and we've got these coming up. The price you see here, £250, is the partner price. There's 2 ways you can have a look. You can go on the edgy.arrow website, and all this information will be shared with the collective after the call if you want to register your interest. These are aimed at end users, so you can sell them on to your end customers within there. I've also added some additional Arrow training and resourcing. So we've got the skills online, which is the screenshot that's kind of shown below, and it's got loads of content and loads of courses that are backed by Microsoft, and also there's some Microsoft Teams training content available on that link as well. And again, we'll share that with you. So that's on the training part. You know, there's lots more. If you want to learn more or think that your customers could use this workshop, then that's available to all the partners on the call today. The third part I kind of want to talk about is the Teams rapid deployment. So this is Arrow's own professional services team. Given what's going on in the current circumstances, we've created the rapid Teams deployment, and this is anywhere from a 2 to 3 day engagement, and there's 2 levels to it. And really it's in line with, you know, the free SKUs, getting a business set up, you know, as businesses are being more strained and want to get Teams functioning as it should. We have the in-house capability and a Arrow certified partners as well that we use that are able to deploy these, and we've got people that are ready to go on this. And it's really just trying to get those customers to utilize Teams in the correct way and get it deployed so they can start using it. So all the stuff that the 2 Matthews and Daniel's gone through in terms of policies, functionality and flow is covered off so that it's set up in the correct way and people are able to use it. If you want any more information on this, please do reach out to me. Again, all these slides will be shared with you, and we've got, as I mentioned, 2 levels to this, a 2-day engagement and a 3-day engagement. So with that, just to kind of summarize, again, the free SKU is available with Teams on Arrow today, and it's the Microsoft SKU. If you do have any questions around anything we've talked about, please put them in the chat. We'll stay online for a couple more minutes and answer any questions that come through. Again, we'll share all this content with you and the recording as well, so you can share with your colleagues and view at a later time. But thanks for joining, and if you have any questions, please do reach out to me.